Hi folks, we're going to get started with the program here in just a minute or so. So if you could join us in the main room and find a seat, we would be glad to have your cooperation so we can get started. Thanks. We're going to begin here in just a moment, so if you are wrapping up in the other room where the refreshments are, please join us in the main meeting room and find a seat. We'll be getting started. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone. Let's find a seat. We're going to get started with our program now. Thank you so much for joining us. It is great to see so many old friends, so many new friends, so many special guests with us this evening. My name is Jeff Garris. I am a member of the Board of Directors of Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. I also spent about 7 years as the executive director of the organization back in the early days. And what we're doing tonight is we're looking back and all the progress that has been made at people who've made a tremendous impact in this movement. And we're also looking ahead for the work that lies before us to abolish the death penalty in Pennsylvania and beyond. So starting off, this is the 20th anniversary of this organization. It began in early 1997. Terry Rumsey, a veteran activist from Delaware County, brought a lot of folks together to start the organization. I wrote a little bit about it in the booklet here, but it was 20 years ago this next week when 23 people, some of them are in the room here tonight, were arrested for nonviolent blockade of the district attorney's office. At the time that the district attorney was Lynn Abraham, who had been dubbed by the New York Times America's deadliest DA. And some of those folks are in the room tonight. One of them, Jim Cummings, who's here, is actually wearing the Stop Executions t-shirt that he had on that day when we were arrested. It's a holy shirt. But Jim and I spent a number of hours there with 5 of our friends in a one-person cell, getting to know each other quite well. perhaps better than some of us intended. But that was 20 years ago this week. Sylvia Metzler is another one of those people who was with us that day, who actually ended up doing 10 days in the county jail and ended up in solitary confinement because she is a nurse and tested positive for having been exposed to TB, which, of course, if you're a nurse, you have. So the solution was to put her in solitary confinement for 10 days. These are some of the people who helped to found this organization. And I want to say that, I was privileged to have the opportunity to serve as the executive director. It happened in kind of an unusual way. I was home taking care of my two then preschool-age children who are now in their 20s. And Terry Rumsey and one of the board members, Bob Smith, neither of whom were able to be here tonight because they're both engaged in activist work this evening, they came to me and they said, Jeff, we just started the organization about a year ago. There's a variety of factors here, but Terry's not going to be able to continue as the executive director. We're really not sure. This is not a good time to switch executive directors and leaders of an organization that's just gotten started. So we're coming to you because we think maybe you could do it. You're home taking care of your kids, so you clearly don't need a job right now. And I said, well, I'm taking care of them. And they said, well, you can still stay home and take care of them. But look at it this way. It'll be an extra $8,000 for you to run this organization while you take care of your kids. And it would have been great if we had actually had the money for that year. But they said to me, but, honestly, if you don't take this on, we don't really have any other ideas, and the organization will probably just disband. And with that vote of confidence, I said, okay, sure, I'll give it my best shot. Unbeknownst to me, and I only found out a couple of years ago, when they left the meeting, they kind of turned to each other and they said, well, what do you think? And they agreed that it would probably, it'd be a 50-50 chance the organization would survive the next 6 months. So this organization has already outlived by 18 and a half years what some of the original founders thought might have been possible. But yeah, thank you, everybody. All right, so that's kind of the starting point for this. It's also the 10th anniversary of the Pennsylvania Moratorium Committee. We are here to celebrate. We are here to acknowledge some special guests. But first, we're going to hear from the head of the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation right here at Chestnut Hill College. We're going to hear from Sister Kathy Nerney. Sister Kathy.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's really my privilege to welcome you to Chestnut Hill College tonight and here to our Sugarloaf campus. It is such an honor to even host and participate in the work that you do. And just listening for a few minutes to its foundations and the shoulders on whom we are all standing tonight, I can say it just deepens my awareness of how privileged I am to be a part of this. As Jeff said, I direct the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation here at Chestnut Hill College. So in many ways, I feel that we support and participate in the work that you're about. Our college was founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph. I am a Sister of St. Joseph. And our mission as a congregation is very simple. We live and work so that all people may be one with God and with one another. So the work of healing divisions, of helping all people to understand that we are all connected, that we are one family, and that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. And so that need to help repair the systems that treat others among us unjustly, including how we have been putting people to death, rather than finding a way to restore life to everyone, this is something that we have committed ourselves to really fight against. So please know that you have in us here at Chestnut Hill College a great supporter of your work. I hope that we will find many ways to work together in this effort to really find alternatives to a system that is so unjust and so violent that we need to say no more. So thank you for being so faithful to this for so long. And I think your future is going to be a lot longer than that shaky beginning that you had. But obviously, that beginning has been blessed because your work is needed even more today than it was 20 years ago. So let me thank you and once again welcome you here to Sugarloaf. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Kathy. I want to pause just for a moment. There are a lot of folks who helped to get us to this place today who are no longer with us, who played very important roles. I'm thinking of just a few of them, folks like Bob Simpson, folks like former death row prisoner William Nieves, folks like Tom O'Rourke, Kathleen Kennedy, and others that many of you worked closely with. I'd like to take just a moment of silence to think and to remember those who have gone before us. We have a number of esteemed guests here with us this evening. Our first speaker comes to us from the Delegation of the European Union to the United States of America. He is the Minister, Counselor, and Head of the Political, Security, and Development Section. Please give a warm welcome to Klaus Batzett.
Good evening, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. Dear Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, dear Pennsylvania Moratorium Coalition, my name is Klaus Batzett, and I'm very honored and pleased to represent the European Union today and celebrate with you this 20th anniversary of the Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty and the Coalition. We're celebrating your continued engagement to put a halt to the capital punishment in Pennsylvania. Now, you will be asking why the European Union is here. The European Union is globally engaged in the fight against the death penalty out of deeply held belief that the death penalty is inhumane and it denies human dignity. Apart from the many other reasons there are I attended a workshop of Witness to Innocence with Leno, who is here with us this evening. And we're determined to continue this work until the death penalty has ended in the United States. More than 150 countries in the world have already abolished, and we're proud to be supporting this effort. It is organizations like yours here in Pennsylvania who make the difference. Pennsylvania is an important state for the abolition movement. It is one of the states that have a moratorium in place, and it has virtually abandoned its use. Pennsylvania only had 3 executions since 1976. And the public opinion in the state has also turned against the penalty, as evidenced by a poll in 2015, according to which only 42% still believe that the death penalty should be applied. These are encouraging signs. This year, in 2017, the United States is in an important crossroads. In the past 20 years, executions have come down to a historic low. And as I just said, public opinion has never been more opposed. Only 2% of the population lives in counties where executions are still carried out. If advocacy efforts continue, we believe that the coming years can make a real difference. There is a window of opportunity. 2 days ago, on the occasion of the World and Europe Day Against the Death Penalty, the delegation of the European Union hosted an event in Washington, D.C., and I see some among the audience who were there. And we were discussing under the title, which U.S. states will be next to abolish the death penalty in the United States? It provoked a very lively discussion, and I personally believe, I don't know what Robert Dunham is going to say, but Pennsylvania could be next. Why not? In any event, wherever, the European Union stands ready to support your continued engagement. It's so essential. We know that these changes will take time. It needs actors like you, with patience and endurance, who don't give up, who are full of doubt, and then keep going for 20 years. And I'm confident you will continue. The PABT could not be a more shining example of how this is done. You have shown leadership over decades with a consistent engagement on various levels, changing pace and strategy when it was so required. On behalf of the European Union and our 28 member states, I would like to thank you and applaud you for your efforts. Now, we as Europeans, we are optimistic that things will, in the end, go the right way. The trend here in the United States is now going in the right direction. Moratoriums like the one in place here in Pennsylvania play a crucial role, but more can and needs to be done to completely end the death penalty. We need partners and supporters like your organization. Without you and your passionate engagement, there could be no success. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU will remain actively engaged across the globe and in the United States to facilitate the international abolition movement. We support individual cases together with you as with our member states. We provide a platform for our partners, and we facilitate behind-the-scenes dialogue with the aim to strengthen the movement. You're a part of this larger movement, and we thank you for it. Thank you so much for having us here tonight.
We have others here with us tonight who have a much more personal experience with the death penalty. Folks who've been courageous in telling their story of what it's like to be wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death and to live for years on death row, not knowing if the truth would ever come out. And we want to acknowledge those folks tonight and have them stand. We're pleased to have with us Kwame Ajamu, Perry Cobb, Jimmy Dennis, and Harold Wilson. Let's give a round of applause. I would encourage you, as we have time for additional fellowship after the program, to take a moment to talk to them and to welcome them here tonight. We have one of the sponsors of an abolition bill in our state Senate who has a special message for us here this evening. I'm told this is going to be by video, so I want to give an introduction by video to Senator Dalen Leach.
I'm sorry I couldn't be with you tonight. I'm down in Washington, D.C. You may have heard we have a bit of a situation down there, and I came down to solve that. In any event, I really appreciate you guys having this dinner tonight and all the great work you do. You know, we have a lot of things to celebrate. There's been a real shift politically and culturally in this country. The death penalty is less popular than it's ever been. We've seen progress even in very red states in terms of abolishing the death penalty. I'm very proud to be the author and prime sponsor of the bill abolishing the death penalty in Pennsylvania, and I will continue to fight for that until we win this battle, and we will win this battle, because as Martin Luther King said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. So please keep up the great work, keep in touch with me, let me know what I can do better, and I look forward to coming to the dinner where we celebrate a great victory someday. Thank you very much.
Thank you to State Senator Dalen Leach, one of the primary sponsors of the abolition bill in our state Senate. Our next speaker is a Christian activist and author of the book Executing Grace: How the Death Penalty Killed Jesus and Why It's Killing Us. My friend and a longtime activist, Shane Claiborne. Shane?
Well, it's just a gift to be together and meet some old friends and make some new ones. It's like a big reunion here. And I'm not a Philadelphia native, in case you can't tell. I grew up in East Tennessee, and I fell in love with Jesus down there in the Bible Belt. And then I began to see some problems with our Christianity. The same people that gave me Jesus gave us Trump. And I also saw that, that when it came to following Jesus, I had a lot of views that needed to be challenged. I spent, most of my life on the other side of this issue in favor of the death penalty. Not just in favor of it, but passionately in favor of it, and convinced it had its roots in Scripture and is ordained by God. And I repent of that. Hallelujah. But I have felt my particular calling to kind of challenge the theology of death and the moral backbone that has kind of allowed the death penalty to stay in place. I mean, the sad truth is that the only way that the death penalty has survived in America is because of Christians. Over 80% of executions happened in the Bible Belt in the last 40 years. Our brother Dale Racinella says, the Bible Belt is the death belt. And there's that old cartoon of Pogo, where he goes, "We've met the enemy, and it's us." So I think that I'm excited, though. I think that part of what is changing hearts is hearing stories like those in this room, our brothers and sisters who witness to innocence, groups like Journey of Hope, that we just got to keep amplifying those voices, I think, that make this issue personal. Those are heroes of mine. A lot of my book has just been leaning in and listening to stories and putting one more microphone under voices like so many of those here tonight. It's an honor to be a storyteller with all of you. And I was just recently able to visit some of my friends down in Unit 2 in Tennessee, my home state. And I get to go back there pretty regularly. And one of them was just removed from death row. And he gave me this little card. It says, "Shane, just as I was writing this letter to you, I wanted you to know I was moved off death row after 30 years. He said, "I just walked on grass for the first time." He goes on to talk about what it's like to walk on grass for the first time after 30 years. So I think the personalism of what we're doing and what it does to us is what we're, I think, all here about. And I'm optimistic. I mean, when you look at the recent studies of millennial Christians born after 1980, like 80% or more are against the death penalty. They can't reconcile it with their faith. We got the Pope making some waves, right, saying it's contrary to the gospel, and I think we're going to hear more and more voices like that. There was a study that was done where they didn't just ask Christians, but I think it was Pew that asked Americans in general, would Jesus be in favor of the death penalty? Like 95% said, no, Jesus wouldn't be in favor of the death penalty. We just got to convince the Christians to take him seriously. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm so grateful for those that don't share my faith, but that support me in that work, and it's a gift to be here with you and to celebrate PADP.
Thank you, Shane. In my early days, joining with this organization and working against the death penalty, I had the privilege of getting to know some of the folks in the legal community who are out there on the front lines defending people's lives, literally defending people's lives. One of those individuals, several of them really, are here tonight, but we're going to hear from one of them next, who is the executive director of the Atlantic Center for Capital Representation, our friend Mark Bookman.
I'm very happy to be here. I actually was not aware that I was going to be speaking, so I'll be short. Longer than you'd like, probably, but short. I want to follow up on what Senator Leach said, because I think it's important for a crowd like this to understand. We're actually winning this battle in many, many ways, and it's important for us as a community to not only understand that, but think it. The only people that don't get this right now are the politicians. Every poll that comes out, 40% for death, 40% for life without parole, 20% for life with parole. Well, you do the math, the majority of people are against the death penalty now. So we don't want to think of ourselves in this community as martyrs. We're not. We're not even ahead of the curve anymore. We're in the curve. And the sooner we persuade our politicians that there's no benefit to being pro-death penalty anymore, the sooner we will end this disaster. So I'd say just one or two more things. One is that we have a lot of talk, a lot of discussion about innocent people who survived the death penalty, and a number of them are here, and I'm very, very happy about it, and I know some of them very, very personally. But my organization, my good friend Abby Smith likes to say that my organization is not the Innocence Project, it's the Guilty Project. I don't mean that everybody we represent is guilty, because they're not. There's all kinds of shades of gray in this process, but it's also important for us to remember that the horror of the death penalty is not just innocent people going to death row. It's guilty people being horribly mistreated in an uncivilized punishment. So, while we're celebrating innocence, and I think that's a very, very important thing, and I think it's taken us a long way, the moral necessity to confront this punishment, no matter what anyone did, is crucial for our community. And, just want to kind of remind everybody of that as well. That's really all I have. So thank you all for being here.
We have with us tonight one of the representatives in our state House of Representatives. He represents the district just a little bit south of here, or kind of in this general area, northwest Philadelphia. He represents District 200. Really pleased to have with us the Honorable Chris Rabb.
I love being confused for honorable. Thank you. That's wonderful. This is, in fact, my district. So welcome to my district. I built it with my own two hands. This district was nothing. I'm kidding. Really happy to be here. My name is Chris Rabb. like rabbit or rabble-rouser. That's an interesting picture of me recovering from surgery. The second day, I just got elected in November. So I'm a new kid on the block. I still have that new car smell, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And the second day I got to Harrisburg, a bunch of folks said, hey, it's a pickup game of basketball. It'd be great to, build relationships and, talk to folks. And my leg did something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And so I was recovering, thus the cane in the back that I whittled. That part is true, actually. I whittled my own canes from the lovely Wissahickon. But this is a particularly momentous occasion for me, this picture, because it enshrined the best examples of a participatory democracy. Because on Valentine's Day, I got a lovely card from a constituent. And that card basically said, you know what, the death penalty is really messed up. We should get rid of it in Pennsylvania. So I looked at the card and I said, yeah. So I called my people in Harrisburg and I said, has anyone introduced it in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives this session? And they said, no. I'm like, you're kidding me. How is that possible? This is the largest full-time state legislature in the United States of America. It is a full-time legislature, and no one had introduced it on the House side. So I said, I want it. But like I said, I'm the new kid on the block. I'm just figuring out where the bathrooms are in the Capitol, and I said, why not? Like, I worked really hard to get in this position to be a public servant. Of course. It's so simple. The majority is behind us, am I right? But even if the majority wasn't, it's still right. I descend from abolitionists. They were not in the majority. I would not be here if it wasn't for black women, black men, white women, people of all backgrounds who believed in social justice before that term was even coined hundreds of years ago. I named my first son after one of my favorite great-great-great-grandparents. He was a radical Presbyterian minister named Reverend Amos Noah Freeman. And he said, you know what, we got to do something about this. Let's shut it down. Let's get rid of slavery in America. And it only took him, several decades. But he died free. He died free. And the things that we care about most, the things that we believe in our hearts are most meaningful, those things may take time too. And we're in it for the long haul. I don't think it's going to take us decades. But I know one thing, it's not going to happen on its own. It requires all of us to work in common cause to get this done for justice. And so it was a very easy decision for me. I didn't have to do any polling. I didn't care what constituents thought. I really didn't. Now, granted, I represent a neighborhood that's considered the People's Republic of Mount Airy, where there are more Priuses than there are almost anything. So, it was not, I'll be honest, it was not a politically courageous thing for me to do, because I have communities that support me, that inspire me in my neighborhoods, in my district, but right is right. And I have a lot of people in Harrisburg who've been there a long time who said, you know what, we're only 81 out of 203, and the majority party is being held hostage by a right-wing extremist group, and this will never get done. So unless you can count the votes, just stop fighting. And I didn't work this hard to stop fighting. I'm just getting started. So when I look at all of you, and I'm going to take a picture of you guys, because I'm surrounded by 100 mini Trumps when I go to work. I don't know about you. And that is brutal. 100, did you hear me? A lot of them. And it is really quite demoralizing. Not enough to not make me think that the cause of justice is not worth fighting for, but it's brutal. So when I see all of you, from all your backgrounds and all the work you've done, you inspire me. I'm not here to, well, I don't know if I'm inspiring you or not, but you're inspiring me. So this is very selfish on my part why I'm here. I recharge my batteries by looking out into the audience and see the people who've been on the front lines, people whose lives have been affected by this, people who believe that right is right, this is the time. And I'm really thankful that you've brought me into the fold. I'm not an expert on this, but I know justice when I can see it. And I am the beneficiary of all the most important social movements that have ever happened in this country. Everything. If you look in this room and you look around, we're not supposed to be here. And we sure as hell are not supposed to be here together. We've been told to be separate. And when people say, well, you know, the state government is dysfunctional, we really need to focus on 45, and that's why I call them 45, you know, politely, in the White House, or we're just focusing on hyper-local stuff. We need everything, local, state, and federal, all at the same time. It's not easy, but that's our charge if we believe in social justice. And I remind people that if you think state government is not sexy enough or not relevant enough, remember this. Slavery was state law. Slavery, that little old peculiar institution we may have learned about in school, that was state law. We have state lawmakers now who are getting away with murder, passing policies that are some of the most inhumane and cruel things I've seen in my 47 years. And they're getting away with it because we let them get away with it, because we're following those shiny objects. We're following what's going on MSNBC and CNN, which is not to say that that's wrong, but we have to look at the unsexy. We have to look at those things that are impacting our lives every day. If you care about the environment, if you care about our young people in public education, if you care about voter rights, immigration, all of those things, it comes through Harrisburg. And this right here, this appeal to abolish the death penalty, that is a state issue. We sure as heck aren't going to wait for the federal authority to handle that. We can do this in our own backyard. This is our Commonwealth. And I want to just say something really quickly about the Commonwealth. When we talk about wealth, most of us are talking about financial wealth. But the next time you talk about wealth, I want you to think more broadly. I want you to think about shared prosperity and abundance in the context of all of those community assets that make life worth living when you put money aside. Public safety, public education, public art, public infrastructure. How about social belongingness, social connectedness? All of those things are forms of community wealth that make life worth living, that make us even have a chance of coming close to being a civilization. We're not there yet. We have a lot of money in this country, but we're not really civilized. But there's a lot of folks in this room and all over the country who are deeply committed to social justice and an equitable, inclusive society. And that's why I do the work I'm doing. And I want to thank you. I want to thank this wonderful organization, and more importantly, this movement, because it's a movement. It's bigger than any one of us, for bringing us all together here today to get the job done. And we can. And I say that not as an optimist, because I'm modestly allergic to optimism. I have friends who are optimists, and I love them dearly, but I'm not one of them. But I say that because I'm a student of history. And all the things that people said we couldn't do. Wait, you're going to give women the vote? That's crazy. The world would explode if you let women vote. You're going to let those people free? They're not even fully human beings. You're going to let them free? Wait, you're going to stop putting children in dangerous factories, and we're going to end child labor? Wait, that's crazy. No, everybody said that stuff couldn't happen. And every time we won, it took a lot of blood, but we made it happen, and no one has ever said, oh, you know, we should start putting kids back into the labor force and working in coal mines. We don't go backwards like that, with a few exceptions. We're seeing some backward slides now, but generally speaking, I'm not talking about the electorate and how fickle we can be on a given election cycle. I'm talking generation after generation, we become more open. We become more loving. And I know that sounds pie in the sky, but think about it. All the hate we're seeing right now, it's not coming from a large group of people. It's coming from a smaller and smaller group of loud, scared people. And they should be afraid because we're destroying them. We're destroying that by love and communing and fellowship to say, enough is enough. We have no time for white supremacy. We have no time for structural inequality. We have no time for scapegoating. And we're winning. And it doesn't look that way, but they're so afraid, they're so violent because they see that their days are numbered. And they are. And you know what else? Who else's days are numbered? This awful government-sponsored murder. It's going to be done, and we're going to be around to see it, to make sure it happens, and we will go on to do other things that are just as important. But in this moment, we have the power. We have the energy. We have the strategies. We have everything we want because we are operating off of abundance. So thank you very much. I am so glad to be here. Welcome to my district, and consider me a resource. I'm here. I'm in it. Let's do this.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to State Representative Chris Rabb. You know, he mentioned going to work in Harrisburg and there being 100 mini-Trumps with him. As somebody who works for a Harrisburg-based organization and spends a lot of time in the Capitol, he was only referring to the State House. If we added in the State Senate, the number would go higher, I'm sure. In a little bit of a segue here, there is a gray Subaru parked outside in the parking lot, license plate HGL 0476. Your interior lights are on. You may not have a battery when you go out. So if you want to wait till the next speaker comes up and pretend you're heading out to the restroom, you can do that. But again, it's a gray Subaru HGL 0476. During my time as the executive director with this organization, whenever I had trouble understanding what was happening lately with the development around the death penalty or a particular case or what a recent court ruling had just said, there was one person in particular who I knew I could always pick up the phone and call, who would explain to me in plain English what was happening, what was at stake, why people should be concerned about it. We're really pleased to have him here with us tonight. He is now the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center, my friend Rob Dunham.
In 1997, there was a rally in Harrisburg. The Harrisburg Capitol building was under construction, and there was this gray shroud that was across the face of the building. And it was the perfect time to have a rally about the death penalty, because the death penalty was a gray shroud that was hanging across the face of Pennsylvania. It still is. It still is. Now, I got to tell you up front that now with the Death Penalty Information Center, we are a nonprofit organization that provides information and analysis on death penalty issues. The Death Penalty Information Center does not itself take a position on the death penalty, but we do provide information, and the information, when you look at Pennsylvania, takes a position by itself. In '97, when Jeff and I were at the Capitol, the question was, are we going to have a moratorium on the death penalty? And the question about a moratorium is, well, what is it? it's a pause. It's a pause to gather information and to decide what you're going to do with that information. And it occurred to me at that time that that was very much like the burden of proof at a capital trial. Is there reasonable doubt about whether a person should be guilty? Is there reasonable doubt about whether they should live or die? And the definition of a reasonable doubt was a doubt that would cause an ordinary person in a matter of great concern to hesitate or pause before taking action. And it seemed to me that everywhere that I looked, there were things that were giving me pause about the way the death penalty was operating in Pennsylvania. We know, because we've done decades of studies in this state, that it typifies the things that are wrong with the criminal justice system in general in the United States. And it typifies, perhaps more than almost any other state, the things that are wrong with the way the death penalty has been administered in the United States. I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up here. It took me longer to drive. It took me longer to walk from the parking lot to the building than it did to drive over here from my house. So I grew up here in Philadelphia. I'm from an elementary school that had somebody on Pennsylvania's death row. I'm from a high school that had somebody on Pennsylvania's death row. And so in many senses, the issue is personal. Are people being fairly prosecuted? Are people being fairly charged? Are people being fairly sentenced to death? One of my good friends is here today, Harold Wilson. Harold was a client of mine. Harold is living proof that the death penalty should give you pause. This is a gentleman who spent nearly 2 decades in solitary confinement for a triple murder that he did not commit, who got to death row because he was prosecuted by a Philadelphia administration that struck African Americans at twice the rate of anybody else. And the prosecutor who handled his case, you can't say authored because he spoke it, he prepared a lecture that was videotaped on how to racially discriminate in selecting jurors. And what he said one should do on that tape is what he did in Harold's case. Nobody should be put in jail because the prosecution engages in racial discrimination in selecting the jury that's going to decide your fate. Nobody should be sentenced to death because the prosecution has set up a system in which virtually all African Americans have been excluded from participation. And yet, in this city in which Harold was prosecuted, in which I grew up, in this city, what gets you to death row more than anything else is the color of your skin. We have 20 years of incontrovertible data. The Philadelphia District Attorney's Office strikes African Americans at twice the frequency of everybody else, and they strike white jurors from integrated neighborhoods with double the frequency of white jurors from highly segregated neighborhoods. I discovered that too when I was called as a juror in a capital case. And they didn't ask me a whole lot of questions. All they needed to know was that I was from Mount Airy. And that was it. Boom, I was gone. It's not just that there's racial discrimination in the jury selection process. When we look at the cases themselves, they are the face of discrimination in America. In Philadelphia, you are more likely to be sentenced to death if you are black, irrespective of the race of the victim. But the data showed us, the studies showed us, that in any murder case, the odds that you would be sentenced to death were 3 times greater if your skin was black. In any murder case in which you moved from being charged to actually going to trial, the odds that you would be sentenced to death increased by a factor of 9 based on the color of your skin. And the data showed us that in a case that proceeded past jury selection, past the guilt stage trial, into a trial for your life, where the jury had to make the discretionary decision about whether to exercise mercy or condemn you to die, the odds that they would exercise that mercy to take a life instead of spare a life increased by a factor of 29 based on the color of your skin. This is the 21st century. We're an advanced democracy. We supposedly believe in equality. Does it give you pause when you see the way that this policy has been administered in Philadelphia? I think if it doesn't, you might need to have your head examined. So in 1997, when Jeff and I were standing on the steps of the Capitol saying that it was time to pause and to consider the facts and to make judgments on the facts, at that time, we thought we had everything we needed to persuade people that they should stop. And the facts in the 20 years since then have only gotten worse. I have some good news tonight, and I have some bad news tonight. Today, we looked at a case that came out of Arkansas. The defendant was convicted and sentenced to death because he confessed to a murder. He didn't commit the murder. He was grossly mentally ill, and during interrogation by the police, he said that he did it. The jury convicted him, the jury sentenced him to death, and then he got a good lawyer. And his lawyer persuaded the Arkansas Supreme Court that he was not just mentally ill, but he was so mentally ill that he was incompetent to have stood trial. And the trial judge should never have let the trial proceed, and the court granted him a new trial. His name is Ricky Dale Newman, and yesterday, after 17 years on death row in Arkansas, he walked out a free man. Ricky Dale Newman is the 160th person exonerated from death row in the United States. 160, and that is an understatement. Because the definition of exoneration is a technical legal one. And there are people in this room who were sentenced to death and are free today and were innocent, but were not technically exonerated. Jimmy Dennis was stone cold innocent from the very beginning, before one of the most corrupt prosecutors in the history of Philadelphia framed him for murder and had him sentenced to death. And there may be 160 people who have been exonerated, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens more who are innocent, who were never exonerated. Some were executed, and some were forced 20 years afterwards, after spending more than a decade in solitary confinement without being able to touch their families, were forced to make a choice about whether to stand for a new trial at which their life was at risk, or plead guilty or plead no contest to crimes they did not commit in order to be free. I'm sorry. It's 2017, and in Pennsylvania, the death penalty still gives me pause. And it should give you not pause, but energy to continue your fight. Thank you for having me. The bad news is that Texas carried out another execution tonight. Robert Pruitt, who is probably innocent.
Our next speaker is the executive director of a very interesting organization called Witness to Innocence. We're pleased to have with us here tonight Magdaleno Rose Avila.
Someone told me last summer that I should believe. You know, sometimes it takes a tragic happening in your life for you to begin to understand everything anew. Last year, about this time, I was on my deathbed. I came within inches of dying. By the time I got out of intensive care unit in downtown Philadelphia, I could not stand on my own. I couldn't walk a step, and this cell phone was too heavy for me to hold. So they sent me to this place called McGee's. It's a rehab center. The first thing I started seeing all over the center was believe. Do you know how scary it is when you can't stand, when you have no muscles, and a therapist tells you that you can stand up? And I couldn't believe it. And they say, you have to believe, Magdaleno. You can stand up. And then when you're in therapy and take your first steps like a baby, it's the most exciting thing. Some people have been to the moon, but I took my first steps. And then over a period of time, I learned to walk. And you know, those of us who've been in the abolition movement, and I know in particular our brothers and sisters have been on death row, believe in a miracle coming. And the miracles come because of good lawyers, good people praying, good activists working on them. And you know, the success of WTI and the success of our exonerees, which are the true voice that really changes the hard minds of tough individuals, in particular conservatives who are for the death penalty, they are the national heroes because they suffered 10, 20, 30 years of their lives on death row, and much of that in isolation. You know, think about this. What did you do for 20 years? 20 years that PADP has been in existence. And think about what somebody couldn't do when they were on death row. It's a difficult road that nobody should suffer. You know, this whole week, we're talking about one of our brothers, a member of our board, JT as we call him, John Thompson, who died at the age of 55 in New Orleans. JT was probably one of the most jovial, energetic of our community of exonerees. He had the biggest smile, the biggest eyes, and he always had a good word for people, and he fought for people who were making the transition coming back. You know, JT was awarded $14 million by the jury, $1 million for every year that he was on death row. And the district attorney and the state fought it, and they went to a place called the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas denied his $14 million judgment. That they used a black Supreme Court justice to make one of the worst decisions against a black exoneree. It was not right, and it's a black page in our history. So, you know, a lot of people have talked about how long it takes things to happen and how much you must keep faith and believe. And we've had some examples of the women's suffragette movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental rights movement, people who did not give up. And, you know, they did not give up when Nelson Mandela was on death row and when he was in prison. We never stopped until we got him out. So, you know, there's a lot of changes that can come. And I got to tell you about one big change since we talked about moratorium. You know, in 1998, I was with my wife, Carolyn, and my daughter, Aviva, in El Salvador, and I got a call from somebody called Sister Helen Prejean. And we were doing a conference call. And on that call was Dick Dieter, who was with DPIC then, and Michael Radelet, who is the author and the expert on innocence. And they said, Magdalena, we've come on this new concept to work on the death penalty. And I said, well, what would that be? And they said, well, what do you think about if we started a moratorium movement? I said, well, what does a moratorium movement mean? It means that we ask the state to take a pause and to study the death penalty. And maybe they'll come to a decision that they don't need it. And I asked Sister Helen, because we were moving back to Miami, I said, how much did the position pay? She said, well, we'll pray for you. So I was the first director of the moratorium movement, and we convinced a lot of people in the abolition movement who didn't believe that we could get moratorium. And moratorium is holding in a lot of states because of the good work of 3 or 4 individuals that convinced us to do this. You know, they asked Martin Luther King during about 2 weeks before he was executed or killed in this country. A news reporter, a national news reporter said, Martin, how are you going to win this battle? They said, you don't have all of the Negroes on your side. And he said, well, he says, I know we have God on our side. And they said, but you don't have all of the Negroes with you. How are you going to win? And Martin looked at him and said, you know, I never thought I'd need all the Negroes. I just want the right ones. And, you know, we don't need everybody. We just need the right ones. And we have the right ones. And we've had the right ones for a long time. We just have to believe and never stop. You know, and that's what all the great movements come. And we should tell the brothers and sisters that still believe in the death penalty, because we are many across this country who don't believe in killing people. We should tell them, we come in peace, but we have you surrounded. So, you know, people like PADP and Witness to Innocence and Sister Helen and many movements and the European Union, we've all planted seeds for abolition. And just like any good seeds, we have to water them so that they'll flower and so that we can harvest the crop. But the seeds are planted and we know we'll win. I just want to leave you, you know, for those of us who spend time in the civil rights movement, sometimes on the darkest day, when the clouds are darkest, when you don't think you have any friends, where victory might not be seen, the obstacles seem too many, the money did not come in, we would always get out and sing a song, and one of them that would sing, we would say, ain't gonna let them turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, I'm gonna keep on a-talking, walking down that freedom road. You know, ain't gonna let no racism turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let no racist turn me around. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, walking down the freedom line. Ain't gonna let no death penalty turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no death penalty turn me around. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, walking down the freedom road. Thank you.
Thank you, Leno. Thank you, Leno. We're going to have some cake, some more refreshments, more opportunities for folks to talk, to meet up with friends, new and old. But we would be remiss if we didn't have a few final remarks from someone who has done so much to make this event happen this evening. I'm really pleased to introduce the Executive Director of Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, my friend Kathleen Lucas.
Thank you. Hell of a party. Thank you all so much for coming, and I have nothing to say except go eat some cake.